Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where ancient wisdom meets modern life. I'm here to help you discover how the greatest philosophical minds in history can transform your daily experience, starting with one of the most pressing challenges we all face: stress and overwhelm. You're living in a time when stress seems to be the universal human condition. You wake up to notification sounds, rush through traffic while checking emails, juggle work deadlines with family responsibilities, and collapse into bed with your mind still racing about tomorrow's challenges. You might think this constant pressure is simply the price of modern life, but what if I told you that nearly 2,000 years ago, a man faced challenges that would make your worst day look manageable, yet he discovered secrets for achieving unshakable inner peace that we can apply right now? Let me introduce you to Lucius Annaeus Seneca, the wisest philosopher of ancient Rome. Seneca didn't live in some peaceful monastery contemplating abstract ideas. His daily reality included devastating plagues that killed thousands, natural catastrophes that destroyed entire cities, financial crises that wiped out fortunes overnight, and colleagues who would backstab you for political advancement. He served under Emperor Nero, a leader so unstable and dangerous that simply showing up to work each day risked execution. On top of all this external chaos, Seneca battled a chronic respiratory condition that left him gasping for breath and wondering if each attack might be his last. Yet here's what makes Seneca extraordinary. Instead of being crushed by these overwhelming circumstances, he used them as raw material to develop the most practical stress management system ever created. He didn't just survive his challenges. He transformed them into wisdom that has helped millions of people across 20 centuries find peace in the midst of chaos. The techniques he developed weren't theoretical. They were battle-tested in the crucible of real-world pressure that would break most people. Today, you're going to discover exactly how Seneca overcame stress that makes our modern problems seem tame by comparison. More importantly, you're going to learn his specific techniques that you can start using immediately to transform your relationship with pressure, anxiety, and overwhelm. These aren't generic self-help strategies or temporary band-aids. They're time-tested methods that create lasting change at the deepest level. Throughout this video, you'll discover why your mind creates more stress than your actual circumstances ever could, how a simple 5-minute evening practice can end the cycle of racing thoughts that keeps you awake at night, and the counterintuitive way that deliberately seeking small challenges can build unshakable confidence that no external pressure can disturb. You'll also learn the ancient perspective technique that makes any problem feel manageable within minutes. Understand why stress happens to you but peace remains entirely your choice, and discover how to transform daily overwhelm into unstoppable personal power that serves you rather than drains you. By the end of this journey together, you'll possess the same inner fortress that allowed Seneca to remain calm and purposeful while everything around him crumbled. These aren't just inspirational ideas. They're practical tools that work in real-world situations. Whether you're stuck in Los Angeles traffic, dealing with a difficult boss in Manhattan, or lying awake at 3 in the morning worrying about your future. Let's begin this transformation by understanding the fundamental truth that changes everything about how you experience stress. 1. Why your mind creates problems that don't actually exist. You're sitting in your car at a red light in downtown Chicago when your phone buzzes with a text from your boss asking to talk tomorrow morning. Instantly, your heart rate spikes. Your mind starts spinning through worst-case scenarios. Layoffs, performance issues, budget cuts, career destruction. By the time the light turns green, you've already lived through losing your job, struggling to pay rent, and explaining to your family why you failed. Yet here's the remarkable truth that Seneca discovered 2,000 years ago. None of those catastrophic events actually happened. They exist only in the theater of your imagination, yet they're causing real physical stress, genuine emotional pain, and authentic suffering in this very moment. This is the first and most crucial lesson Seneca teaches us about overcoming stress. We are torturing ourselves with problems that don't actually exist. As he wrote to his friend Lucilius in his famous letters, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about the profound implications of this insight. The vast majority of your stress isn't coming from what's actually happening to you right now. It's coming from what your mind is projecting might happen in the future or what it's replaying from the past. Seneca understood this because he lived it. As advisor to Emperor Nero, he spent countless hours worrying about political intrigues that never materialized, assassination plots that existed only in paranoid whispers, and career disasters that remained purely hypothetical. He watched himself create elaborate mental scenarios of exile, execution, and disgrace, only to discover that most of these fears never came to pass. Even when real challenges did arise, they were rarely as devastating as his imagination had painted them. Let's examine how this plays out in your daily life with surgical precision. You're scrolling through social media in a Seattle coffee shop when you see a colleague's promotion announcement. Immediately, your mind constructs an entire narrative about how you're falling behind professionally, how your own career is stagnating, how you'll never achieve your goals, and how everyone else is succeeding while you're failing. Within minutes, you've created genuine anxiety about a completely imaginary competition that exists nowhere except in your own thoughts. The colleague's success doesn't actually diminish your opportunities. Their promotion doesn't create any real obstacle to your advancement. Yet your mind has manufactured a crisis out of thin air, and your body is responding with authentic stress hormones as if you were facing an actual threat. This is what Seneca meant when he observed that we are often our own worst enemies, creating internal chaos where external peace could exist. Consider another scenario that demonstrates this principle with startling clarity. You send an important email to a potential client and don't hear back for 2 days. Your imagination immediately begins crafting explanations. They hated your proposal. They think you're unprofessional. They've chosen a competitor. Your business is doomed. You spend those 2 days in genuine distress, checking your phone obsessively, second-guessing every word you wrote, and planning how to salvage a situation that exists entirely in your head. When the client finally responds with enthusiasm, explaining they were simply traveling, you realize you've spent 48 hours suffering over a problem that never existed. Seneca recognized this pattern because he was extraordinarily honest about his own mental tendencies. He wrote extensively about how his mind would race ahead to imagine financial ruin when a business deal was delayed, political catastrophe when a meeting was postponed, or social humiliation when a friend seemed distant. He discovered that his imagination was far more creative at inventing disasters than reality was at delivering them. This insight reveals something profound about human psychology that modern neuroscience has confirmed. Our brains evolved to prioritize threat detection over accuracy. Your mind is constantly scanning for potential dangers and creating elaborate worst-case scenarios because, from an evolutionary perspective, false alarms are safer than missed threats. The caveman who assumed every rustling bush contained a predator lived longer than the one who assumed it was just wind, even though most rustling bushes contain nothing dangerous. But in modern life, This protective mechanism has become a source of constant suffering. You're not facing saber-toothed tigers. You're facing delayed emails, ambiguous text messages, and uncertain futures. Your ancient brain responds to these modern situations with the same alarm system designed for life or death emergencies, creating stress responses that are wildly disproportionate to actual threats. Seneca's revolutionary insight was recognizing that you have the power to interrupt this process. As he wrote, "There are more things likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." This isn't just philosophical observation, it's practical psychology that you can apply immediately. The moment you notice your mind constructing elaborate disaster scenarios, you can step back and ask Seneca's essential question. Is this actually happening right now? Or am I creating this problem in my imagination? Most of the time, you'll discover that you're battling phantoms, wrestling with shadows, and solving problems that exist only in the realm of possibility rather than the world of actuality. Understanding this distinction between imagined and real problems isn't just intellectually interesting. It's practically liberating. When you recognize that your mind is the source of most of your stress, you realize that your mind can also be the source of your peace. This recognition leads us naturally to the specific techniques Seneca developed for managing racing thoughts and creating inner calm. 2. The 5-minute evening practice that ends racing thoughts. Imagine this scenario. You're lying in bed at 11:30 p.m. in your Manhattan apartment, exhausted from a demanding day, but your mind refuses to shut down. Instead of peaceful sleep, you're experiencing what feels like a mental tornado. Your thoughts jump from tomorrow's presentation to last week's awkward conversation with your manager, then spiral into worries about your parents' health, your relationship status, and whether you remember to pay your credit card bill. Each thought spawns 3 more, creating an endless cycle that keeps you staring at the ceiling while your body grows more tired and your mind grows more agitated. This nightly mental chaos is exactly what plagued Seneca nearly 2,000 years ago, and his solution remains one of the most powerful tools for achieving inner peace that has ever been discovered. Seneca didn't just theorize about managing racing thoughts. He developed a specific 5-minute evening practice that transformed his relationship with mental turbulence and can do the same for you tonight. The practice Seneca created is deceptively simple yet profoundly effective. He called it his evening review, and he wrote about it extensively in his letters as the foundation of his mental discipline. As he explained to Lucilius, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine the whole day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by." This wasn't casual reflection. It was a systematic process for capturing and organizing the mental energy that would otherwise keep him awake with worry. Here's how you can implement Seneca's exact method starting tonight. Before you begin your bedtime routine, sit at your desk or kitchen table with a simple notebook and pen. No computer, no phone, no digital devices that emit blue light and stimulate your already active mind. The physical act of writing by hand engages different neural pathways than typing and creates a more meditative, calming experience that naturally slows down your racing thoughts. Begin by writing down everything that's currently cycling through your mind, no matter how trivial or overwhelming it seems. Don't organize these thoughts, don't analyze them, don't try to solve them. Simply transfer them from the swirling chaos of your internal mental space onto the concrete reality of paper. Write about the meeting that didn't go well, the conversation you need to have with your partner, the project deadline that's approaching, the family dinner you're dreading, and the career decision you've been avoiding. Seneca discovered that this simple act of externalization has an almost magical effect on mental turbulence. When your worries exist only in your head, they feel enormous, urgent, and impossible to manage. But when you write them down, something remarkable happens. They become finite, specific, and suddenly much more manageable. The abstract anxiety transforms into concrete problems that your rational mind can actually address. The second phase of Seneca's practice involves what he called honest self-examination. After you've emptied your mental contents onto paper, review what you've written and ask yourself 3 essential questions that Seneca used every single night. First, what did I do well today that I can build upon tomorrow? This isn't about ego inflation. It's about recognizing your positive actions and reinforcing behaviors that align with your values and goals. Second, what mistakes did I make today, and what can I learn from them? Seneca believed that mistakes were valuable teachers, but only if we took time to extract their lessons rather than simply feeling guilty about them. This question transforms regret into wisdom and helps you approach tomorrow with greater clarity and purpose. Third, and most importantly, what am I worried about that is actually outside of my control? This question strikes at the heart of Stoic philosophy and addresses the root cause of most mental agitation. Seneca understood that we torture ourselves by trying to control outcomes that are fundamentally beyond our influence, like other people's opinions, economic conditions, or future events that may never occur. As you work through this process, you'll notice something extraordinary happening. The thoughts that seemed so urgent and overwhelming when they were bouncing around in your head begin to lose their emotional charge when you examine them systematically. Many of your worries will reveal themselves as variations of the imaginary problems we discussed in the previous section. Others will prove to be genuine concerns that require action, but now you can approach them strategically rather than anxiously. The final element of Seneca's evening practice involves what he called voluntary discomfort for the mind. Just as athletes stress their muscles to build strength, Seneca believed in deliberately exposing himself to manageable mental challenges to build psychological resilience. This might involve spending 5 minutes contemplating a fear you've been avoiding, imagining how you would handle a worst-case scenario, or reflecting on the temporary nature of your current comfort and security. This isn't masochistic self-torture, it's strategic mental conditioning. By voluntarily thinking about uncomfortable realities during a calm, controlled evening practice, you build your capacity to handle actual stress when it arises unexpectedly. Seneca called this preparing the mind for fortune's attacks, and it's remarkably similar to modern exposure therapy techniques that help people overcome anxiety disorders. The beauty of this 5-minute practice lies in its cumulative effect. After just 1 week of consistent evening reviews, you'll notice that your mind begins to quiet more quickly at bedtime. After a month, you'll find that fewer thoughts create anxiety because you've trained yourself to distinguish between real problems and imaginary ones. After 3 months, this practice becomes a cornerstone of inner peace that transforms not just your evenings, but your entire relationship with mental turbulence. Tonight, when your head hits the pillow, instead of battling racing thoughts, you'll have already processed them, learned from them, and released them. This foundation of mental clarity prepares you for the next level of Stoic stress management, building unshakable inner strength through deliberate challenge. 3. How to build unshakable inner strength through small challenges. You're standing in your comfortable Los Angeles apartment on a perfectly tempered morning when you make a decision that seems completely irrational to everyone around you. You're going to take a cold shower. Not because your hot water is broken, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you understand something about human psychology that most people miss entirely. You're about to engage in what Seneca called voluntary discomfort, a practice that builds the kind of unshakable inner strength that no external circumstance can disturb. This concept might sound counterintuitive in our comfort-obsessed culture, but Seneca discovered a profound truth about human resilience. The people who can handle life's inevitable hardships are not those who have been protected from all difficulty, but those who have deliberately exposed themselves to manageable challenges when they had the luxury of choice. Think of this as strength training for your mind and spirit, just as you might stress your muscles at the gym to build physical power. Seneca didn't develop this philosophy in the abstract comfort of academic theorizing. He lived it daily, creating a systematic approach to building psychological resilience that prepared him for everything from political exile to life-threatening illness. As he wrote to Lucilius, "It is precisely in times of immunity from care that the soul should toughen itself beforehand for occasions of greater stress, and it is when fortune is kind that it should fortify itself against her violence." The genius of Seneca's approach lies in understanding the difference between voluntary and involuntary discomfort. When hardship strikes unexpectedly, it often overwhelms us because we're psychologically unprepared and emotionally reactive. But when we choose to expose ourselves to manageable challenges during periods of calm, we build what psychologists now call stress inoculation. We develop confidence in our ability to handle difficulty because we've proven to ourselves that we can endure and even thrive under pressure. Let's examine how this works in practical terms that you can implement immediately. Seneca regularly practiced several forms of voluntary discomfort that you can adapt to modern American life. He would deliberately sleep on the floor instead of his comfortable bed, fast when food was abundant, wear his worst clothes in public, and expose himself to cold temperatures when he could have remained warm. These weren't acts of self-punishment. They were strategic exercises in building mental toughness. Consider how you might apply this principle in your daily routine in New York City. Instead of always taking the most comfortable transportation option, occasionally choose to walk the extra mile to your destination, even when you could afford a taxi. When you're at a restaurant, sometimes order the simplest item on the menu instead of indulging in elaborate comfort foods. Take the stairs instead of the elevator, even when you're carrying groceries to your fourth-floor apartment. These small acts of choosing the slightly more difficult path build a reservoir of inner strength that serves you when life presents unavoidable challenges. The key insight that Seneca understood is that comfort, while pleasant, creates psychological weakness over time. When we always choose the easy path, we gradually lose confidence in our ability to handle difficulty. We become fragile, dependent on external circumstances remaining favorable for our well-being. But when we regularly practice voluntary challenges, we develop what Seneca called contempt for danger through familiarity with danger. This principle extends far beyond physical discomfort into emotional and social territory. You might deliberately engage in conversations with people whose opinions challenge your worldview, not to argue but to strengthen your ability to remain calm under intellectual pressure. You could practice public speaking when you don't have to, building confidence for the day when you must present to important stakeholders. You might volunteer for projects at work that push you outside your comfort zone, developing skills and resilience that serve you throughout your career. Seneca illustrated this concept with a military analogy that remains remarkably relevant today. He wrote, "The soldier performs maneuvers, throws up earthworks when no enemy is in sight, and wearies himself by gratuitous toil in order that he may be equal to unavoidable toil." Think about this deeply. Soldiers don't wait until battle to develop their skills and endurance. They train rigorously during peacetime so that when war comes, their bodies and minds respond with trained competence rather than panicked improvisation. The same principle applies to your psychological development. If you wait until a major crisis hits your life to develop resilience, you'll be overwhelmed by the dual challenge of handling the crisis while simultaneously trying to build the mental tools to cope with it. But if you've been regularly practicing voluntary challenges during peaceful periods, you'll have already developed the inner resources to handle whatever life presents. This practice also creates an unexpected psychological benefit that Seneca discovered through personal experience. Voluntary discomfort makes ordinary life feel extraordinarily pleasant by comparison. After spending a night sleeping on the floor, your regular bed feels like luxury. After taking cold showers for a week, normal warm water feels like a gift. After walking long distances, comfortable transportation becomes a source of genuine gratitude rather than mindless expectation. This shift in perspective is profound because it addresses one of the root causes of modern dissatisfaction: hedonic adaptation. We quickly adjust to improvements in our circumstances and begin taking them for granted, always needing more comfort and convenience to feel satisfied. But voluntary discomfort reverses this process, helping you appreciate what you already have while building strength for what you might face. Tonight, when you're planning tomorrow's schedule, identify one small area where you can choose the slightly more challenging path. This isn't about creating unnecessary suffering. It's about building the kind of inner fortress that allows you to remain peaceful and purposeful regardless of external circumstances. This foundation of voluntary strength training prepares you for the next level of Stoic resilience, transforming your deepest fears into sources of confidence. 4. Turn your biggest fears into your greatest confidence. You're standing outside a conference room in downtown Chicago, about to deliver the most important presentation of your career. Your palms are sweating, your heart is pounding, and your mind is flooding with catastrophic possibilities. Forgetting your words, stumbling over key points, facing hostile questions you can't answer, or watching your credibility crumble in front of industry leaders. This moment of terror feels overwhelming, but what if I told you that Seneca would view this exact scenario as a golden opportunity to build unshakable confidence that no future challenge could disturb? This transformation from fear into strength isn't wishful thinking or positive psychology platitudes. It's based on one of Seneca's most powerful techniques, which he called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This practice involves deliberately confronting your worst fears in a controlled, systematic way so that they lose their power to paralyze you when they arise in real life. Far from being morbid or pessimistic, this technique creates genuine confidence by proving to yourself that you can handle whatever life presents. Seneca developed this approach because he understood a fundamental truth about human psychology that remains valid today. Most of our fears derive their power from the unknown. We're terrified of job loss, not because unemployment itself is inherently unbearable, but because we've never seriously considered how we would actually handle that situation. We're paralyzed by the possibility of public embarrassment because we've never mentally walked through what recovery from such an experience would look like. Our fears remain abstract monsters that grow larger in the darkness of our avoidance. The genius of Seneca's method lies in dragging these fears into the light of conscious examination, where they shrink to manageable proportions. Let's explore how this works with the presentation scenario that opened this section. Instead of spending the days before your big presentation trying to avoid thinking about failure, Seneca would have you deliberately and thoroughly imagine the worst possible outcomes. What exactly would happen if you forgot your opening line? How would you respond if someone asked a question you couldn't answer? What would be the actual consequences if the presentation went poorly? As you work through these scenarios systematically, something remarkable happens. You discover that even your worst-case fears have manageable solutions. If you forget your opening line, you could acknowledge it briefly and move forward with humor and grace. If you can't answer a question, you could honestly admit your knowledge gap and offer to follow up with research. If the presentation goes poorly, you could learn from the experience and improve your skills for next time. The catastrophic outcomes that seem so devastating in abstract fear reveal themselves to be temporary setbacks with clear paths to recovery. This process works because it transforms vague anxiety into specific planning. When you're afraid of something abstract like failure, your mind has nothing concrete to work with except escalating panic. But when you break down that fear into specific scenarios with specific responses, your rational mind can engage with problem solving rather than simply generating more anxiety. You move from helpless victim of circumstances to capable strategist with contingency plans. Seneca practiced this technique throughout his life with remarkable effectiveness. As advisor to Emperor Nero, he regularly meditated on the possibility of political exile, financial ruin, and even execution. This wasn't masochistic self-torture. It was strategic preparation that allowed him to remain calm and effective, even when these possibilities moved from imagination to reality. When Nero eventually did turn against him, Seneca faced his death with the same philosophical composure he had cultivated through years of mental preparation. You can apply this same principle to modern fears that may seem less dramatic but feel equally overwhelming in daily life. Are you terrified of dating rejection? Spend time seriously considering what would actually happen if someone declined a second date. You would feel disappointed for a period of time, learn something about compatibility or approach, and continue meeting new people until you found someone genuinely interested. Are you paralyzed by the possibility of starting your own business? Walk through the specific steps you would take if your venture failed. Updating your resume, networking for new opportunities, applying lessons learned to your next endeavor. The key insight that makes this technique so powerful is understanding the difference between preparation and rumination. Rumination involves repeatedly cycling through fears without reaching any resolution or plan of action. This mental quicksand that pulls you deeper into anxiety with each worried thought. Preparation, by contrast, involves systematically examining potential challenges and developing specific responses that leave you feeling more capable and confident. To practice this effectively, set aside 30 minutes in a quiet space where you won't be interrupted. Choose one significant fear that has been limiting your actions or peace of mind. Write down the specific worst-case scenario in detail, then systematically work through how you would handle each element of that situation. What resources would you draw upon? What support systems could you activate? What lessons would you extract from the experience? What opportunities might emerge from an apparent setback? As you complete this exercise, you'll notice that your relationship with the fear begins to shift fundamentally. Instead of feeling like a helpless victim of potential circumstances, you become a capable strategist with multiple contingency plans. This transformation from powerlessness to preparedness creates the foundation for unshakable confidence that serves you in all areas of life. Consequently, what once felt like your greatest vulnerability becomes a source of strength, preparing you for the perspective techniques that make any remaining problems feel surprisingly manageable. 5. The ancient trick that makes any problem feel manageable. You're sitting in your Denver apartment at 2 in the morning, staring at your laptop screen filled with spreadsheets that represent your mounting financial obligations. Credit card debt, student loans, car payments, and rent create a suffocating wall of numbers that seems to grow larger every time you look at them. Your chest feels tight, your breathing becomes shallow, and the weight of these problems feels so enormous that you can't imagine any possible solution. This moment of overwhelming despair is exactly when Seneca would teach you his most transformative technique, the art of stepping back to gain cosmic perspective. This ancient method isn't about minimizing real problems or pretending difficulties don't matter. Instead, it's about understanding how perspective fundamentally changes the emotional weight of any challenge you face. Seneca discovered that most of our suffering comes not from our problems themselves, but from how close we hold them to our consciousness. When we're pressed up against our difficulties with our noses touching them, they appear enormous and insurmountable. But when we learn to step back and view them from different vantage points, they shrink to manageable proportions. Seneca called this technique drawing back and laughing, though his use of laughter wasn't about dismissing serious concerns. Rather, he meant the kind of perspective-induced relief that comes when you realize how much larger you've made something in your mind than it actually is in reality. Think about a time when you were lost in an unfamiliar city, feeling panicked and disoriented while wandering through confusing streets. Then imagine climbing to the top of a tall building and looking down at that same area from above. Suddenly, the maze of streets reveals itself as a simple grid with clear navigation paths. Your problem didn't change, but your perspective transformed everything. Let's apply this principle systematically to the financial stress scenario that opened this section. When you're buried in the immediate anxiety of debt obligations, your mind can only see the crushing weight of monthly payments and accumulating interest. But Seneca would guide you through a series of perspective shifts that fundamentally change how you experience this challenge. First, he would have you zoom out from this month's problems to consider your entire financial journey over the next 5 years. Most debt problems that feel catastrophic in the present moment become manageable when viewed as part of a longer-term repayment strategy. Next, he would encourage you to expand your perspective beyond your personal situation to consider the millions of people who have successfully navigated similar financial challenges throughout history. Your debt crisis, while genuinely difficult, becomes one example of a common human experience that countless others have overcome through patience, planning, and persistent effort. This isn't about comparing your struggles to others in a way that minimizes them, but about recognizing that you're facing a solvable human problem rather than an impossible personal catastrophe. Seneca would then guide you to the most profound level of perspective, viewing your current financial stress from the vantage point of your future self, 10 years from now. From that temporal distance, you would likely remember this period as a challenging but ultimately growth-producing phase of your life. You might even feel grateful for the financial discipline and resilience these difficulties taught you. This future perspective doesn't eliminate present challenges, but it provides emotional context that prevents them from consuming your entire sense of well-being. The power of this technique extends far beyond financial stress into every area where problems feel overwhelming. Consider how it applies to relationship conflicts that seem earth-shattering in the moment. You have an intense argument with your partner in your Seattle apartment, and in the heat of that emotion, it feels like your entire relationship might be ending. But Seneca would have you step back and view this conflict from multiple perspectives. How significant will this argument seem next month? How many similar conflicts have you and your partner already worked through successfully? How does this disagreement look when viewed as part of your overall relationship journey rather than as an isolated crisis? This perspective technique also transforms professional challenges that feel career-threatening. You make a significant mistake at work in your New York office, and your immediate emotional response is panic about job security and professional reputation. But when you apply Seneca's method of stepping back, you begin to see this mistake as one incident in a long career trajectory. You consider how many similar mistakes other successful professionals have made and recovered from. You imagine how this experience might actually strengthen your skills and judgment over time. The key to mastering this technique lies in training yourself to shift perspectives automatically when you notice overwhelming emotions arising from specific problems. This requires practice because our natural tendency is to zoom in on difficulties rather than zoom out from them. When stress hormones flood your system, your attention narrows and focuses intensely on immediate threats. But Seneca understood that this biological response, while useful for physical dangers, creates unnecessary suffering when applied to complex life challenges that require strategic thinking rather than fight-or-flight reactions. To develop this skill systematically, practice the perspective exercise during calm moments before you need it during crises. Choose a current concern in your life and deliberately work through the various vantage points Seneca would recommend. View your problem from next month's perspective, next year's perspective, and the perspective of your older, wiser future self. Consider how your challenge fits into the broader context of human experience throughout history. Building on this foundation of perspective mastery, we can now explore the deeper philosophical truth that underlies all effective stress management. Understanding what aspects of life are truly within your control. 6. Why life brings challenges, but peace remains your choice. You're walking through Times Square in Manhattan on a rainy Tuesday evening when your phone rings with news that changes everything. Your company is restructuring. Your position has been eliminated, and you have 30 days to find new employment. As you stand there watching thousands of people rush past, umbrellas colliding and taxi horns blaring, you feel the weight of this unwelcome reality settling into your chest. Your mind immediately begins racing through a cascade of concerns. Mortgage payments, health insurance, career reputation, family security, and an uncertain future that suddenly feels completely out of control. This moment perfectly illustrates the fundamental choice that defines human experience and forms the cornerstone of all Stoic philosophy. The phone call happened, the job loss is real, and the practical challenges ahead are genuine. But here's what Epictetus, the wisest teacher in Stoic history, would want you to understand in this moment. While you cannot control the fact that this disruption occurred, you retain complete authority over how you respond to it. This distinction between what happens to you and how you react to what happens to you represents the difference between inevitable external events and optional internal suffering. Epictetus knew this principle intimately because he lived it under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. Born into slavery in ancient Rome, he experienced the ultimate form of powerlessness over external circumstances. He couldn't control where he lived, what work he performed, or even whether he would be beaten or sold to different masters. Yet through this profound limitation of external freedom, he discovered something that no emperor could take away: the absolute sovereignty of his internal responses to whatever life presented. His master often treated him with casual cruelty, breaking his leg during one particularly violent episode that left Epictetus permanently disabled. Yet even in that moment of physical agony and complete helplessness, Epictetus recognized that his master could damage his body but could not touch his capacity to choose his mental response to this treatment. This realization became the foundation of his teaching that freedom exists not in external circumstances, but in the unrestricted ability to choose our thoughts, attitudes, and responses regardless of what others do to us. This discovery led to his most famous teaching, which he repeated throughout his lectures to students who came from across the Roman Empire to learn from him. Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are our opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, position, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. Let's examine how this principle applies to your job loss scenario with surgical precision. The restructuring decision was made by executives responding to market conditions, competitive pressures, and strategic priorities that had nothing to do with your personal performance or value as a professional. This external event falls clearly into Epictetus' category of not within our power. Attempting to control or undo this decision would be like trying to change the weather through force of will, an exercise in frustration that depletes your energy without producing any useful results. However, everything about how you respond to this situation remains completely within your power, and this is where your true agency lies. You can choose to interpret this setback as evidence of your professional inadequacy, or you can view it as an opportunity to find a role that better matches your skills and interests. You can spend your energy cursing the unfairness of corporate decisions, or you can channel that same energy into networking, skill development, and strategic job searching. You can allow this temporary disruption to define your self-worth, or you can maintain confidence in your abilities while adapting to changed circumstances. This distinction isn't merely philosophical theory. It's practical psychology that determines whether you experience the next 30 days as a period of growth and opportunity, or as an extended ordeal of anxiety and victimhood. When you focus your mental energy on factors outside your control, you generate stress without producing solutions. When you redirect that same energy toward elements within your influence, you create progress while maintaining inner peace. Consider how this principle extends beyond major life disruptions into the daily irritations that accumulate throughout ordinary days. You're stuck in traffic on the Los Angeles freeway system, and your immediate impulse is frustration about the delay, the poor urban planning, and the inconsiderate drivers around you. But Epictetus would guide you to recognize that the traffic conditions are external circumstances beyond your control, while your emotional response to those conditions remains entirely your choice. You cannot make the cars move faster through mental effort, but you can choose to use this unexpected pause in your schedule for reflection, planning, or simply accepting the present moment without resistance. This shift from fighting unchangeable external conditions to exercising control over your internal responses transforms a frustrating delay into a period of peaceful acceptance or productive thinking. The practice of distinguishing between controllable and uncontrollable factors requires constant vigilance because our natural tendency is to waste enormous amounts of mental energy on circumstances beyond our influence. You worry about whether your colleagues respect you, but their opinions are formed by their own experiences, biases, and psychological needs that have nothing to do with your actual worth. You stress about economic conditions affecting your investments, but market forces operate according to complex global dynamics that remain completely outside your personal control. Yet the mental energy you spend worrying about these external factors could be redirected toward elements that are genuinely within your power. Developing skills that make you more valuable regardless of others' opinions, creating diverse income streams that provide stability during economic uncertainty, or building relationships based on authentic connection rather than others' approval. The profound implications of this teaching become clear when you apply it systematically across all areas of life where stress and anxiety typically arise. Other people's opinions of you, economic conditions, political developments, natural disasters, aging, illness, and eventually death itself all fall into the category of external circumstances that you cannot control through worry or resistance. Yet your responses to each of these realities remain entirely within your power and determine whether you experience them as sources of suffering or opportunities for demonstrating wisdom and resilience. This understanding creates the foundation for what Seneca called becoming emperor of yourself, ruling over the only territory where you possess absolute authority, your own thoughts, choices, and responses to whatever circumstances arise. Ultimately, this philosophical foundation prepares you to integrate all these Stoic principles into a practical system for transforming daily overwhelm into sustainable personal power. 7. Transform daily overwhelm into unstoppable personal power. You wake up in your Chicago apartment at 6:30 a.m. to 17 unread text messages, 43 new emails, and a calendar packed with back-to-back meetings that stretch from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. Your phone buzzes with social media notifications while your mind immediately begins cycling through your growing to-do list. The project deadline approaching next week, the family dinner you promised to organize, the dentist appointment you keep postponing, the gym membership you're not using, and the financial planning you've been avoiding for months. Before you've even gotten out of bed, you're already feeling defeated by the sheer volume of demands competing for your attention. This scenario of daily overwhelm has become the default human experience in modern American life. But what if I told you that Seneca would view this exact situation as raw material for building unstoppable personal power? Everything we've explored in previous sections, the evening practice that calms racing thoughts, the voluntary challenges that build inner strength, the fear-facing techniques that create confidence, and the perspective shifts that make problems manageable, all converge in this moment to transform overwhelming chaos into purposeful action. The key insight that separates those who thrive under pressure from those who crumble beneath it lies in understanding how to apply Stoic principles systematically rather than sporadically. Most people treat stress management like emergency medicine, reaching for calming techniques only when they're already overwhelmed. But Seneca approached stress resilience like physical fitness, building strength through consistent daily practices that create unshakable foundations before challenges arise. Let's construct a comprehensive framework that transforms your overwhelming morning into an opportunity for demonstrating Stoic mastery. The moment you notice that familiar surge of anxiety about your packed schedule, you immediately apply the choice principle from Epictetus. You recognize that while you cannot control how many emails arrived overnight or how many meetings were scheduled by others, You retain complete authority over how you respond to these external circumstances. Instead of allowing your mind to spin through the entire day's demands simultaneously, you implement Seneca's evening review technique in reverse, creating what we might call a morning intention practice. You take 5 minutes to write down everything competing for your attention, not to solve these items immediately, but to move them from the swirling chaos of your internal mental space onto the manageable reality of paper. This externalization process transforms abstract overwhelm into concrete tasks that your rational mind can organize and prioritize. With your concerns now visible rather than just felt, you apply the perspective technique that makes any problem feel manageable. You step back and view today's challenges from the vantage point of next month, recognizing that most of the urgency you feel is artificially created by your proximity to immediate demands rather than their actual importance. This shift in temporal perspective allows you to distinguish between genuinely time-sensitive priorities and tasks that simply feel urgent because they're present in your awareness. Now comes the crucial integration of voluntary challenge principles into your daily routine. Instead of approaching your packed schedule as something to endure, you reframe it as an opportunity to practice the kind of grace under pressure that builds lasting resilience. You deliberately choose to view each meeting, email, and obligation as a chance to demonstrate the inner strength you've been developing through regular Stoic practice. This mental reframing creates a profound psychological shift that transforms your relationship with productivity and stress. Rather than feeling like a victim of circumstances beyond your control, you become an active participant in your own character development. Each challenging conversation becomes practice for maintaining equanimity under pressure. Every tight deadline becomes an opportunity to demonstrate focus and efficiency. Every unexpected interruption becomes a chance to practice flexibility and adaptability. The fear-facing techniques we explored earlier prove particularly valuable when applied to daily overwhelm. Many people avoid checking their email or calendar because they're afraid of discovering additional obligations or bad news. But when you've trained yourself to confront fears systematically, you can approach your daily responsibilities with curiosity rather than dread. You open your email not with anxiety about what problems might be waiting, but with confidence in your ability to handle whatever you discover. This approach extends beyond individual task management into the broader question of how you relate to modern life's accelerating pace. Most people experience constant connectivity and increasing demands as external forces that victimize them, creating a sense of helplessness that generates additional stress beyond the practical challenges themselves. But Stoic practice transforms this victim mentality into what we might call warrior consciousness, where you meet life's challenges as opportunities to demonstrate the virtues you've been cultivating. The evening review practice becomes particularly powerful when applied to days of intense activity. Instead of collapsing into bed feeling drained by everything you've handled, you spend 5 minutes reflecting on how well you applied Stoic principles throughout the day. Did you maintain perspective during the difficult client meeting? Were you able to stay focused on what was within your control when the project timeline changed? How effectively did you use challenging moments as opportunities for character development rather than sources of complaint? This daily integration of philosophical practice with practical action creates what Seneca called the examined life, where ordinary activities become vehicles for extraordinary personal development. Your commute becomes meditation time for setting daily intentions. Your lunch break becomes an opportunity for gratitude reflection that reframes afternoon challenges as continuing education in resilience. Your evening routine becomes a systematic review process that extracts wisdom from the day's experiences and prepares you for tomorrow's opportunities. In essence, what transforms daily overwhelm into unstoppable personal power is the recognition that external chaos cannot disturb internal order when you've built strong enough philosophical foundations. The same situations that once felt crushing now become raw material for demonstrating the Stoic virtues of wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance in practical application. Your journey to Stoic mastery. The transformation you've just experienced through these ancient teachings mirrors the same journey that countless individuals have taken across 20 centuries of human history. From Seneca facing political turmoil in ancient Rome to modern Americans navigating the complexities of contemporary life, the fundamental challenge remains unchanged. How do we maintain inner peace and purposeful action when external circumstances seem designed to overwhelm us? What makes the Stoic approach so enduringly powerful is its recognition that true strength comes not from controlling our environment, but from mastering our responses to whatever that environment presents. You now possess the same tools that allowed Seneca to remain calm during plagues and political upheaval, that enabled Marcus Aurelius to lead an empire while maintaining philosophical wisdom, and that gave Epictetus the freedom to teach profound truths even while physically enslaved. The evening practice that ends racing thoughts becomes your daily reset button, transforming mental chaos into organized clarity. The voluntary challenges that build inner strength prepare you for life's involuntary difficulties with confidence rather than fear. The technique of facing your deepest anxieties converts your greatest vulnerabilities into sources of unshakable confidence. The perspective shifts that make problems feel manageable provide instant relief from overwhelming situations. The understanding that challenges are inevitable but suffering remains optional gives you sovereignty over your emotional life. And the integration of all these practices transforms daily overwhelm into opportunities for demonstrating unstoppable personal power. But here's what separates intellectual understanding from life-changing transformation: consistent application of these principles in real-world situations. The Stoic teachings we've explored today aren't meant to remain abstract philosophical concepts that you admire from a distance. They're practical tools designed to be used daily, in traffic jams and difficult conversations, during financial stress and relationship challenges, in moments of success and periods of setback. Your journey towards Stoic mastery begins the moment you close this video and face your next real-world challenge with these ancient principles guiding your response. Tonight, when you practice the 5-minute evening review, you'll be following in the footsteps of history's wisest individuals. Tomorrow, when you choose voluntary discomfort over automatic comfort, you'll be building the same inner fortress that protected Seneca through life storms. Next week, when you face a fear directly instead of avoiding it, you'll be demonstrating the courage that Epictetus taught was always within your power to choose. This is more than stress management. It's a complete philosophy for human flourishing that has been tested across cultures, centuries, and countless individual lives. The wisdom that transformed ancient Roman philosophers can transform your modern American experience if you commit to applying these teachings consistently rather than sporadically. If this exploration of Stoic wisdom has sparked something meaningful in your life, I encourage you to subscribe to the Stoic Vivu channel, where we continue making ancient philosophy accessible and practical for contemporary living. Like this video if these teachings resonated with your experience, and share this content with anyone in your life who might benefit from discovering how to overcome stress like ancient Rome's wisest philosopher. Your engagement helps us reach more people who are searching for genuine solutions to life's inevitable challenges. Together, we're building a community of modern Stoics who understand that inner peace isn't just possible, it's achievable through the systematic application of time-tested wisdom to everyday life.